there! I'm Elisa Marley. Welcome to this second day of the 7th Online Summit for Face Painters. In today's classes, you will work with some of the most amazing artists of the whole world face painting scene. You will start with me today and we will see together how to build and create 3 beautiful forest-themed face painting design you can use on the job and adapt to your own style. So, let's start. Let's begin with some theory. Here I prepared a technical form to explain to you how to think and create a design with a specific topic, which is the forest theme today. Here you can see 3 main name sections that should be the most important keywords to keep in mind when you're up to building a specific design starting from zero. So, starting from the top we have elements. Think about your topic as a collection of things, whether it is an environment, a character, or just a general subject. So here I drew up a list of some natural items that can immediately tell where your design is set, such as forest leaves, flowers, branches, mushrooms, butterflies, and so on with whatever comes up in your mind. Then we have flow. I will never stop saying this, line work flow has an infinite power and has so much more to tell than you think. You can use different teardrop shapes, lengths, movements, according to the topic's wave. So in this case, leafy points, swirls, shapes and structures that remind of the forest plants and features. Last but not least, we have colors. Choosing the right color palette can transform completely the overall view of your design. The main color here is green in each of its shades. It's the must in each forest-themed palette you will choose. It should be flanked by a different red color which reminds of the colorful elements you choose to insert or you just want to mention without actually painting them, such as pink, lilac and light blues. Warm colors are a great option as well next to the green if you want to give a more fall vibe, while yellow and white are perfect to enhance the light of your design. Then obviously we have brown shades, the color of the trunks and the ground. So mix all these elements together and study your own favorite combinations. Let's move on to study some line work examples together. I divided my sheet into 5 parts that will help me paint more cleanly. We have 4 central compositions in the upper part and 5 signed examples in the lower one. As you can see, this line work style matches the leafy, rounded, planty movements of the forest ambient. So taking inspiration from this, try to study and create by your own some flowy combinations to use on the job or just for yourself. I'm using the Superstar Dark Green. I start by marking a little dot before as my focal point and I'm going with the first main vertical line which will split into my line work scheme, symmetrical side to side. I start with the tip of the point, then I press the bristles and gradually release the pressure going down to my focal point. Then I go on the left and add this slightly diagonal teardrop with the point going internally and do the same on the right side. Now I'm changing where the teardrop starts from the top to below and extending a little bit more the teardrop length to give it some dynamic. Changing the movement again, I add 2 little ones here to fill the space as I will go with these main diagonal teardrops that stayed and lead the movement of the whole composition. I'm finishing with these little lines here facing downwards. Going on, I start with a vertical teardrop the same as before, which is followed by other 2 ones on each side, gradually shorter. Then, starting with the tip of your brush, I start painting 2 nice band lines that enfold everything together and I connect them with some dots inside gradation. Don't be stingy with your dot sides, they must be noticed. Then I switch the direction and add these stretched swirls going to the top and then facing the swirl down. As I kept them a little too much below, I'm not painting the little teardrops inside, but I just go on with the longest lines, following the swirl movement to the top, pretty much similar to the ones of the first example. After that, I finish with these last little teardrops in the lower part, just like that. Now we keep everything symmetrical, but this time we don't have a dividing line. Instead, we are painting in the center this rounded petal-shaped line, thin next to the focal point and becoming gradually larger in the wider part above. Inside of it, I'm adding this little swirl and two little flicks on the sides of the petal following its rounded shapes, just like this. We will connect them later with some dots. Then I paint these high S-shaped teardrops, and as they came up a little wider than expected, I'm adding just another little one per side. Going on, we're gonna paint two long straight lines with a final bending downwards, followed by two similar but shorter lines. Then two nice and rounded swirls going down, and two last lines filling the space below, 3/4 the same length as the main petal above to keep the harmony well. And then final dots just to finish. Last central composition, here I'm using teardrops to create some leaves shapes. I'm starting with these three little pointy petals connected to each other, followed by these other two longer ones facing upwards. See how I just released the movement out without following the line till the end? This permits you to reach this flowy line wave and not result too heavy when painting your line work. In the wider angle, I add these oval bent teardrops, the overall movement leaders, and starting from the same point, two flowy vertical curves, slightly curved but not too much. They should result thin and soft, as they're just a fancy addition and not main leading lines. Right between the lower leaves and the main curves, just if you have some space left, I'm adding these little teardrops to fill the gap, following the movement of the upper leading line. Going down, two round flicks to shape out this lower section. Inside, I'm painting these two little bent lines that connect the flicks together. To finish up everything, I add some other tiny secondary lines and little flicks and dots as always. Now let's move to the side-eye examples. The first composition is focused just in the upper part of the side face area, so towards the eyebrow. Here we need to stake the two main lines that will let you know where to insert the other teardrops and how. So I'm starting with this long, crisp S-shaped line, and keeping a nice wide angle, I add the other one, which should coincide with the outer corner of the eye. Going on the left, next to what should be the eyelid, I'm adding this nice curved line. Imagine it finishing right under the eyebrow arch. Then next to the first main line, a little bent teardrops, and to fill the angle spaces, I'm adding extra tiny lines and little pointy leaves. Moving on to the second example, I paint the two main leading lines. You don't need to have something specific already in mind. Start painting your leading lines how you feel and fill the angle spaces following the line movements, always keeping the focus on your focal point. I started first with the teardrops next to the first line I painted in the upper part, then I'm switching to the lower one here, and right in between them I'm adding an extra leading line that divides my two opposite parts. Then I add a few thin flicks to enrich everything more and my dots. Here I wanted to show you an example inspired by butterfly wings. This time we're keeping the focal points both in the inner and outer corner of the eye while we build our composition. So main teardrop above, slightly S-shaped, then a nice bent line switching the point direction. Inside of it, I added this tiny teardrop to fill the gap, and right below another nice long curved line. Changing the focal point to the outer one, I'm adding these little swirls inside, then a little flick going up and another tiny teardrop to finish. Dots, as always, extending the movement of the lines. We go on with something more fancy but not that difficult. Again, a full side-eye composition. I'm painting the main leading lines in the two opposite parts, pretty much the same but inverted. I add this curved line below next to the longer S-shaped teardrop, and also add the decor element that splits into the composition. Not just an horizontal line, but a rounded petal with another smaller one inside. Tiny teardrops on its sides, flakes, dots, and you're ready. This last one is my favorite of all them. It has more leafy lines inside and has just a unique round and magical movement, perfect for a forest queen. Our main line is similar to the first one of a butterfly wing. Start thin with a nice and round wide bending at the end. Right below, starting from the same point, I'm adding this little rounded swirl, which is much similar to a petal but not closed. To state the division between the upper and the lower part, I'm adding this long curved wavy line with a super thin ending. It somehow should follow the bending of the main swirl above. Under it, I'm adding different lengthened lines, with the last two a little more pointed and facing to the internal part of the face. Right above the first teardrop, I add these two leafy lines, not to separate but sticking to it, to make it similar to some kind of curly plant. Inside the little petal, I'm adding a little line to fill the space, and then I add the last teardrops, which are slightly different because don't follow the same focus as the others. They have in fact as their own focal point the wider part of the swirl bending. Now that we're fresh of notions and nicely warmed up, we can finally start with some complete designs. The model, it's me, I'm sorry, you will see my silly faces till the end of this class, and there are plenty. We're starting with a low difficulty design, practical and colorful. It can be easily adaptable to your needs on the job, and it's perfect for little puppies as it gives a lovely fairy tale vibe. I'm using 3 colors to create a vibrant and bright green gradient shade, with glycerin white, yellow and light green. I'm loading them separately on my petal sponge, starting from the white on the point. I suggest you to always use the brighter color in the inner corner of the eye to make your design shine. Then I take the yellow, bend my sponge a little, and I load with horizontal movements, keeping the colors well separated but without leaving spaces between them. Then I proceed loading the left space of the sponge with my green. You don't need to bend the sponge, but you can just turn it to make it easier. The result is an express split cake, a great solution if you work most of all with solids like me, or you don't have millions to spend each month, again like me. I start applying the colors on the eyelid, maintaining this nice petal shape, without going too much above the eyebrow arch. If your colors get dried, you can spray some water to reactivate them and go again on your area. I'm dabbing the sponge gently, and I always check where I am applying the color. A clean sponge base is essential for a well-done design, so take your time and don't rush things. Reserve your fastness for the lines on the job. I go on the other eye and repeat the process. I didn't load the sponge again, but just sprayed some water. You could also reload just a bit of white if your express split cake loses some brightness. By the way, if you load your sponge correctly at first, you should be able to paint both sides and don't waste time while working. Next step, while your colors are still wet, white sparkling glitters all over your paint. When your tones are very bright, it is always better to use a neutral, almost transparent glitter. White is the best choice for me. It's holographic, shining and pretty much invisible. This one is by Superstar. I don't remember how it's named, but I'll write it in the handout. Going on, let's take our co-starring color shade. Next to the green, we use lilac. They're a great couple together, and as we've also used the yellow, we can reach a great visual impact because purple and yellow are complementary colors. Never mix them or you will have a grayish brown shade, but putting them next to the other 100%, yes. I'm using a quarter of a round sponge, so half of it. The sponges I like to use the most are those with the rounded edges. They're so much easier to use for color bases, blend really well and don't leave unwanted marks like the others do. So I load it with my lilac. Be generous while loading to get a nice, bright, crisp color that really makes the difference. I apply the color right between the eyebrows, dabbing with more pressure in the center and gradually blending out while the sponge releases the color. I keep more or less the same height as the outer part of the green base. Once I'm happy, I go on dabbing my lilac under the eye, creating this rounded shape and remaining on the higher cheek area, without going too much inside the corner. I blend everything well and always check if I'm covering the right area. I also tend to bend the sponge to have a spherical surface that helps me be more precise during the application. Next color we're using to add some more saturation to the lilac is bright pink. I use the same sponge from before and I add a touch of pink light on my lilac base, leaving some space in the outer part. Don't cover anything, just add a little touch. I do the same thing between the eyebrows as well, focusing the blending just in the upper part. Glitter time again, same as before. Sprinkle, sprinkle well, they're so much easier to use on other people than on yourself. Then little proud check and Italian motivational gestures, and we're ready for the next step. I take my favorite line work brush from all the times. This is a Winsor & Newton Cotman collection, round brush number 5 I guess, and I load it well with some dark green. When loading your brush, it is essential to keep the bristles in their vertical shape, so use vertical rotation movement while you're loading it, otherwise the bristles point will open and get damaged. Quadruple check here to find where the hell I should start, but once your brain starts working again, you can paint your teardrops, keeping as your focal point the outer corner of the eye. So I painted a first rounded line right under the eyebrow, directed to the inner corner, followed by the main leading line with this nice pointy tip, touching the other one in the external corner. I added another one shorter right beside. See how I press down the bristles where the lines bend the most. This helps you keep a nice, clean and crisp line that goes straight along her way and also gives so much more structure to the line work, most of all when you see everything composed together. I add another little teardrop with the point facing downwards and a thin flick to close this upper part of the side composition. As I have some space left, I add a super little curved line inside the first one, and then I repeat the line work process on the other side, this time faster. Last adding a few other little brush flicks on both sides to have this more leafy effect. Next step, I'm taking this cheap pointy brush that should be a number 3. I chose it because I need a brush that opens a little while pressing down the bristles, in this case, because we're gonna paint some branches in the lower part of the design. So I'm using this medium brown and load my brush well, and then I also take this burgundy to get the color more saturated. Once I'm ready with the loading, I start painting my branches, basically using the same scheme as teardrops. Branches should be painted like you would do for tiger stripes. They're wider at the beginning, where they touch, and become gradually thinner while they get longer. They're irregular, so you should press the bristles multiple times, and they are constituted by a main bow with some smaller arms that spring up from it. Here I'm painting just 3 of them, not many. I repaint my branches trying to keep the symmetry, and once I'm done, I take my light green again. I'm using this super round short brush. This should be a petal brush of the maximum size, and I start loading my bristles with the green. We need to reach a super creamy, almost sticky consistency, doing round movements and opening the point a little bit. We need to use this basically as a little sponge to create a moss effect or some kind of abstract foliage texture, just like I'm doing here. So I start dabbing my brush like this, focusing on just a few areas of my branch arms. If you need, add some green color if you want to enhance it. Then I load some paraffin white to add some lights on the green just above it. When you have to add lights or shades and don't have an actual light source painted, just choose a side that will be the same for everything. Now, when you're done with your lights, take some dark green and add some shades right in the lower part of the foliage so that you will have 3 shades in gradation from darker to lighter. I'm dabbing my brush here below my leaves on one side and then obviously on the other one. I'm adding some extra touches here and then we can move to the next step. Then I take this floral brush. This is from a brush set I bought on Temu. It creates beautiful pointy petal shapes and I will load it 4 times. Don't worry, it's not difficult. Start with the paraffin white and load well all the bristles. Then load just the point with yellow, almost 3/4 of the white. Then go on with pink on half of the yellow. Then at last a nice dark purple, just the point, half of the pink. Be sure to leave spaces between one color and the next one. If you load it well, the result will be a beautiful gradient petal where you can see each color. I didn't reach such a perfect result, so I will add some colors after I paint my whole flower here. Because surprise, our central element is a flower, but not one panel, we will create a nice original petal composition. Start painting your petals, dabbing the brush 2 or 3 times. If your pressure is not too heavy, you will have super delicate smudged edges, which make it very realistic. So here we have 3 main petals right in the center of our brows. Then I start just with the brush tip to bring out more of my upper petals, and I finish with these last 2 ones, which are longer and more rounded, doing the same work as teardrops do. Check it well, they're slightly curved and come together internally. As I told you before, I would have not been happy with the shading, so I'm adding one by one the colors I wanted to be seen the most, using a small filler brush. So in the same order, I'm using a little bit of yellow at first, then a little bit of pink and a little bit of purple at the end to get some more contrast. To enrich the central composition, I use this long, thin liner brush, which is perfect for long and precise pointy lines, such as blades of grass. Here I'm painting a couple blades around the flower using dark green, creating a sort of rounded frame that follows the shape of the flower and enfolds all the petals together. Then I add some other quick brush flicks here and there, focusing on the teardrops area and going also a little bit down on the nose, under the petals, and around my branches under the eye, keeping everything round and flowy. Now, last touches, which are not really necessary but that give a nice kick to the design. I'm adding some black at the beginning of my lines to make everything more clear, with high contrast and definition. I'm using a round brush number 3 from Superstar. This comes in a 3 brushes set and Diamond FX Linework Black. I'm adding a darker touch also on the tiny tip of my flower petals to make them more definite with super gentle and thin strokes. And then, using the same brush reloaded with dark green, I'm adding even some eyeliner that always makes the difference. I'm connecting it to the smaller swirl right on the side of the eyelid. Here I'm saying almost finished in Italian with the gesture included. Now, time for dots. Yes, they're the actual start of this design. I'm loading this classic round brush. The tip shouldn't be pointed, but just round. To paint the perfect dot, load the brush till you have a little sphere of color cream on the bristle's tip. I add my dots at first in the center of the petals, creating this sort of vertical line, always with different sizes in gradation. Then I fill the space in between these 2 teardrops under the eyebrow, following the exact same movement on both sides. I add other dots around my branches and again above the eyes, and just a couple in the inner corner. So here I'm painting my dots in the outer part of the design, right next to the outer corner. Then I'm extending these blades of grass with some other dots, basically continuing the line. A couple dots here to give these strands some more sparkle, and then, as I told you before, in the inner corner. Now, as I had some white left on my bristles, I'm also going to add some extra lights right above my leaves on the branches. Blending everything, and then we can move on to the lipstick. I'm outlining the lips with a small filbert brush and the dark purple I used before. The consistency should be fatty and creamy, such as a standard lipstick. I blend the purple, leaving a little space in the center of the lips, and I start filling it with the same pink we have already used. I blend everything together and then I add a touch of yellow. You can add it just on pink, in this case, if you want to avoid dirty browny shades. Remember to always use a transition color between two complementaries. Dab a little with your fingertip for a smoother blending if necessary. Then when you're ready, you can add some sparkly white glitters while the paint is still a little sticky. And here is our finished fairy tale forest design. Ta-da!